I'm delighted to say we have Jac Owen. She is founder and MD of Connect.
Hello.
And Connect uh, handles and manages inquiries for care homes. So it's going to be a very, very important episode. And we are going to focus particularly on how to best manage inquiries that come into care homes. So, let's get straight in. I'm going to start off by introducing Jac, or rather, Jac is going to introduce herself. So, hi, Jac. Why don't you tell everyone a
Hello.
little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Okay, thank you so much, Adam, and thank you very much for having me on this podcast. So I'm, as Adam says, Jac from Connect. We're based in the Northwest. We help care providers increase their occupancy, and we do that by helping them manage their inquiries. So something I'll always say is people never ring a care home just for the sake of it. They've always been through some sort of journey beforehand, and it's important that first of all the call is answered. That's the very first step. So over 52% of calls that go into care homes can be unanswered, and not just
Hmm.
calls, we're looking at emails and live chats as well. So yeah,
Hmm.
we help care providers increase their occupancy by providing full end-to-end care management, inquiry management services.
Great, great. And if you go over to their website, which we'll come to, you'll see that Jac works with a number of care providers who you will probably recognize. Okay, good. So, Jac, why don't you start off, or why don't we start off by advising us all on how to think about best managing those inquiries when they come in.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, Adam, first of all, it's making sure the inquiry is
Hmm.
answered. First of all, there is a certain element of recognizing that people have been on that emotional journey or are
Hmm.
quite often at crisis point. Looking for a care for a loved one is one of the top three most stressful decision-making processes you can go through in life. So I think very important, getting your team to understand that the people who are calling are ringing because they have been through a journey. So it's making sure even simple things like your greeting is nice and slow at a pace that people can understand. Quite often, when we do mystery shops on care homes, you ring a care home and it's very rushed. It's hello, thank you for calling. Da, 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 da. Whereas actually, it needs to be a bit slower so the person feels that they have got
Hmm.
time to speak about their situation.
Hmm.
It's very personal to them. It's about their loved one. So it's making sure that they feel heard, listened, and understood.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think one of the things really is in line with that, it goes hand in hand, is making sure that it's not a tick box exercise.
Hmm.
So although we need to capture, and it's really important that the teams within care homes capture a certain amount of information, such as the type of care that's required, how the care is going to be funded, the length of care required, all that sort of thing, that should be done in more of a conversational manner rather than a tick box exercise.
Hmm.
And those things can quite often come out if you just have that conversation with people.
Mm, mm. And it's such an important first impression, isn't it? That it is uh, that first impressions that a family will get when they make a call and when they make have that
Yeah,
first conversation. I was looking
yeah,
at some data yesterday from Trusted Care uh, about source of inquiries.
yeah,
And a fifth, it was 63% will inquiry will be as a result of some kind of digital journey. So I'm thinking, so that probably means at some point they would have taken a look at your website
yeah,
before making that call. So they've seen your website, they've got an impression from that,
mhm,
impression of your home, and then they call.
yeah,
And that's the first time they are having a real person connection. And you talk about being slow paced and not a tick box. And you can, we all make inquiries to
yeah.
companies. And we
That's
can
right.
tell, can't we? We get that impression that you get straight off.
Straight away.
Very
Yeah,
important, isn't
absolutely.
it?
it stays with you. I use a quote to all my team that I always say, and it's a famous quote, but people will often forget what you said, but they'll never forget the way you made them feel. And I just think
Yeah.
that's so important. It hits the nail on the head, really, for me.
Mm,
When
mm,
people are ringing care homes, you're absolutely right. Quite often they'll have gone through some digital journey,
mm,
either visiting the website, going on a
mm,
brokerage team service,
mm,
lots of different ways. Sometimes it literally is a social worker will give a family a list of care homes, and that
mm,
person's then going through that list. If they ring a care home provider and either A, they don't answer the phone in the first instance, or they do, and they don't sound like they care about my mum, dad, loved one,
mm,
then we just move on to the next. And that's a lost inquiry. These are high value purchases that people are making. They need to be treated with that warmth and that empathy and that respect. So it's something that we're very passionate about at Connect. um
mm,
that
mm,
whole process is so difficult for people, so we like to think we bridge that gap between the care providers and their commercial objectives, so to speak, but also
mm.
the person looking for care who's at the forefront of what we're doing, really.
Yeah, yeah. And all inquiries come in by different means, don't they, Jack? So you have a phone call, you have an email, you have a live chat, you have a
That's right.
brochure downloads.
Yeah.
Tell me, and we've touched on that on the first one of these, which is the call.
Yeah.
And I like when you talk about being slow paced and not a tick box because no one wants to be treated as part of a tick box exercise. When you are, training your people in your team, I'm curious to know, and this is for relevant to care providers listening, how do you
Yeah.
do that training? How do you structure it? What kind of important points do you endeavor to communicate?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question because there's so many different elements. So people think it's
Mm,
just a phone conversation, where actually it's not just as simple as
mm,
that. So one of the first things we talk about is our listening skills, which sounds like a very
mm,
obvious thing, but actually you need to be picking up on things like the tone of voice, how they are sounding. So for example, if someone's speaking very fast and they're breathless, that could
mm,
demonstrate that they're very nervous about this or they're very
mm,
anxious about this.
mm,
So we would use then reassuring tones to try and make them feel more at ease and more comfortable. So it's picking up on things like that. If
mm,
someone's speaking very fast and very abruptly and they're asking just closed questions, do you
mm,
have availability? What are the weekly fees? That can sometimes indicate that someone's at crisis point. So then you have a different type of technique and how you deal with those sorts of calls. You would make sure you give the information in a really confident but friendly manner. So you're instilling confidence in them and therefore the care home that you know the answer and you can guide them. What
yeah.
we talk about as well is, by the time that phone conversation has finished, is the person you're speaking to really clear on what's going to happen next? So are they going to receive a brochure? Are they going to come for a show round? Are they expecting a call back from a manager? So making sure they know what's going to happen next. What we will try and do within a phone call is use a lot of open questions. So, for example, tell me about the current situation. What's
Mm,
happening with mum and dad at the moment? And then what you'll find is people instantly relax. Sometimes you can almost hear it in their voice. It could be something like, I'm looking for care for my mum. I'm going on holiday. I need some respite care. Do you have any availability? And then rather than just saying, yes, we've got availability, we'll say, tell us about what's going on. Then that opens up the whole conversation. And
mm,
generally through that,
yeah.
we can find information such as the type of care that they want, how it's going to be funded, all those really key things. The
Mm,
other thing that's absolutely key for me is that the person, we're asking questions about the person who
mm,
requires care.
mm,
So the example I sometimes use is, does dad like activities? Because if not, there's no point talking to him about how we do
mm,
armchair bingo and that sort of thing.
mm,
But does he like gardening? And then if so, we can talk to him about the lovely garden. We've got the conservatory. and we can pass that key information onto the home who will be doing the show round, so they can then tailor that to that individual. So again, it's about that personalization. It's treating people as individuals and not as, again, a number or going through a tick box exercise. It's
Mm.
about that real empathy and treating people as a person.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds great. And where do you stand? So I love this idea of which um is prevalent across. I mean, because this is like it's a set in marketing parlance. This is a sales
Yeah.
call, right? So
Yeah.
and it's about understanding what their issues are, their problems, where they
Yeah.
are at, and that empathy, that conversation to make sure that then you are positioned to move them to the next step as best you can, if you can help. Um, and um, Tell me, I'm curious to know about those calls which are a little bit more to the point,
Yeah.
where the person answering the phone may have to, you know, um, think about how they respond when
Yeah.
it's, let's say, a very direct question. Hi, I'm just ringing. I just want to know your prices,
Yeah.
for
So we
example.
have all
Yeah,
that information and we're really
yeah,
transparent about
yeah,
it. As you'll be well aware, Adam, it does vary between the care home providers we work with in
yeah,
terms of how their prices are,
yeah.
what they're based on. So, for example, some care
Mm,
homes do it based on the care type, and that the
mm,
outcome of that is based on the assessment. Some care providers, it's the type of room. Does it have a balcony or a garden view, and that
yeah,
sort of.
yeah,
So we will always give indicative prices
yeah.
just so they have an idea of what the weekly fee is. Uh,
Mm,
and we
mm.
have that information per home for all the care providers we work with.
And tell me, what's your thoughts on having the prices on a website?
I
What's your
think,
thought on that?
yeah,
Do it or not?
yeah, well, I've worked with care providers since around 2009 now.
Mm,
And it's really been a journey because at
mm,
first we didn't used to tell prices at all or have them on the websites.
mm,
But now we obviously do have them on the majority of websites. And I think it's really important
mm,
because
mm,
it's a very big decision, sometimes time sensitive. So there's no point misleading people or wasting
mm,
their time if something
mm,
is way outside of their budget and they need to
mm.
look at something else. So
Yeah,
I think,
yeah.
yeah, it's quite good to have the prices on the website and be as transparent as possible.
Mm, mm. I'm always wondering about that one because
Yeah,
I sometimes, you know, because if someone's shopping purely on price,
yeah,
which is understandable, then you're missing an opportunity to speak to someone that who, who if you can convey that you are best placed to help them, and even though you may be slightly more pricey, actual
yeah,
fact, there's a reason perhaps where you may be more pricey,
yeah,
and then you can have that conversation with them about it. Whereas if the pricing is not it is on the website, you might kind of miss that conversation. I'm just, and
yeah.
different people I speak to have different takes on that. And um, that's why I was curious to know what you think.
Yeah, it works both ways as well, actually, I
Mm,
found. So I was helping a friend out recently,
mm,
was putting her grandmother in she did nursing care, actually, permanent nursing care.
mm,
She was privately funded. There was a home that came up on the search that was quite reasonable weekly fee. It was
yeah.
local authority funded. And she wanted to dismiss it straight away. And I said, let's go and have a look anyway, because
Mm,
obviously that's when you get the
yeah.
feel.
Yeah.
So we went into this home that was a
Mm,
local authority home, quite inexpensive compared to some other care homes in
mm,
that particular area.
mm,
But when you went in, every single member of staff smiled at you. All the
mm,
residents looked really happy and chatty.
mm.
Um, so I think that made a real difference. So sometimes it can work both
Yeah.
ways,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
And
I
I
see.
think one of the old things we used to say is
Mm,
let's invite people into the care home. Then they can be wowed by the care home and the great team and the lovely home and everything else like that.
Mm.
But like I say, you have to have a certain level of transparency these
Yeah,
days when you're
yeah, of
not
course.
totally misleading. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's an interesting one.
yeah,
And I've
yeah.
been through every kind of stage of that, really. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And so tell me about your advice on um, ways to contact. We said at the beginning of this episode about the prevalence of a digital journey,
Yeah.
and people likely to be on your website, and not always before making contact. What advice do you have on the various call to actions, the ways to contact the home, specifically?
Yeah. Do you know what? I think it's really important that care providers are accessible as possible. I think
Mm,
that's like number one.
yeah.
So overwhelmingly, phone calls is still the
Mm,
most used method of
mm,
contact.
mm,
Um, but a lot of people use our live chat and they'll do that
mm,
during working hours.
mm.
Sometimes they might be at work. Quite often we have inquiries from people who are actually in the house where they're caring for someone and don't want to be overheard. And then likewise, some people prefer communication over email. A lot of people have anxiety about making phone calls,
Yeah.
such as this. Like I say, it is such
Mm,
a big thing. It's not just a phone
mm.
call. People will literally have to pluck up the courage before they ring sometimes.
Yes.
So they do prefer email. In terms of the sort of how they get the phone number and that sort of thing, I think it's really important that you track that. So you will, at companies like you, Adam, will put all the work into making sure the inquiries are generated in the first place. So we do lots of tracking through pay-per-click, Google, Facebook, so we know where the person's seen the phone
Mm,
number.
mm.
And we will give our care providers a dedicated number for that campaign so we can measure the
Right.
success of campaigns, even if we do a door drop, for example. So I think, yeah, that's really important that that's measured.
Mm.
Like I say, making sure then you are as accessible as possible. Even things like WhatsApp is now becoming more popular.
Yes.
People
Yes.
prefer to WhatsApp rather than actually pick up the phone. But in my opinion, because everyone's
Mm,
so different, making it as accessible as possible, definitely.
mm. And that's great. And what's your take on the follow-up with an inquiry, and how often and when and how to do it? So many care providers are uncomfortable with the follow-up,
Yeah.
um, mainly because they think and somehow, oh, they've given the information, it's now up to them. My take is a little different on that, but I'm just curious to know what you think, your approach to the follow-up.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think sometimes people would be apprehensive about doing the follow-up because they
Mm.
feel that they're bugging people.
Yeah, yeah.
And although we definitely shouldn't be bombarding people and we
Mm,
should have guidelines in place. So, for
yeah.
example, if you've contacted someone 3 times and they've not answered,
Mm,
you should either change that maybe to a long-term inquiry or dismiss
mm,
people altogether. Um, yeah, it is really interesting because for me, it's actually courtesy.
mm,
I really like it when people follow me up. So, for example, if I've contacted somewhere and requested a brochure, and then maybe 4 days later, so you've had chance to receive the brochure in the post,
mm,
depending on it being working days, of course, and not bank holidays or Royal Mail. You've received the brochure, you've had time to read and digest it. Then
mm.
it's really nice if someone rings me and just says, just wanted to check you've got the brochure. Have you got any more questions? So I think it's really about training the people who do the follow-ups not to worry about that and actually think of it as a helpful service rather than they're bugging people.
Yeah, look, I 100% agree on that. I mean, I
Yeah,
think it's that conversation. You're running a care home. You are proud of what you do, hopefully.
yeah,
You want to be able to help people who approach you. And
yeah,
if they're asking for a brochure, that's because they want to find out. We would all want to find out ourselves. And I agree. Like,
yeah.
so you've sent Jill a brochure. And yeah, what does she think of it? Can we
Yeah,
answer any more questions? How does it
yeah,
look? How is your mum? How's she
yeah,
getting on? And you know, that I do think, tell me what you think, but I think that's that's an that is a skill in its
yes,
own right, how to do
yeah,
it appropriately,
yeah,
properly,
yeah,
in a way that positions you, this
yeah.
marketing speak, but positions you as someone who's really wants
You
to want
care.
to help. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it exactly.
Mm,
So
mm,
you're ringing because you've had that initial contact with them. You care about, you've built that rapport with them, hopefully, in that first interaction. For example, when we take a phone call and we send someone an email following on from
mm,
that, we'll always personalize it and reference something that we've spoke about in that conversation. So I think it's just really coaching people that
mm.
actually follow up is because you care and because you're interested and you want to see how you can help further. And then people have always got the option and the opportunity to say they don't want to be contacted anymore, in which case that's absolutely fine. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's nothing to worry about there.
Yeah, and for those care providers who are listening and thinking, you know, it'd be good for us to revisit our handling of inquiries, and maybe have a bit more of a system rather
Yeah.
than just like everyone just deals with it as it arises. What might be a first step you would recommend for them?
Well, a first step I would say is, I mean, they can reach out to me and I can give them
Mm,
some advice. I can do a mystery shop. We can see what's going on,
yeah,
really. I
yeah.
think the first thing is looking at the whole journey. So from that first phone call, how is that then managed? So
Mm,
first of all, do people know they've got to follow something up? Have they got a system in place that will say,
mm, mm,
you sent a brochure 4 days ago, you now
mm,
have to follow up on this inquiry. So what are the
mm,
different touch points, I guess, if you like,
mm,
on that
mm.
journey when people need to? But yeah,
Mm,
definitely reviewing it. We obviously we do this on behalf of care
mm,
providers.
mm,
Smaller care providers sometimes want to keep it within that home, in which case we can offer training as well for the team members on how to deal with the inquiries themselves and look at what processes they've got in place at the moment and what needs
mm,
to be altered slightly.
mm. And tell me about conversions and conversion rates and what you've seen, experienced, and how the conversion rates may vary according to different homes, different kinds of residents that they cater for.
Yeah.
Maybe different conversion rates according to the channels versus, a Google search versus a recommendation, for example. Tell me what you've discovered and feel about variable conversion rates.
Yeah, so one of the tricky things about what we
Mm,
do here is we deal with the initial inquiry, so
mm,
we often don't get
yeah,
to see what
yeah,
happened.
yeah.
And it's something I say to my team as well because they can build such a relationship with the caller
Mm,
quite
mm,
often. A couple of weeks later, they want to check what happened with that caller.
yeah,
But
yeah.
actually, after that bit, that goes to my
Mm,
care providers and they look after that. So how we use conversion rates though is in terms of inquiry. So a new care inquiry to a show round appointment. That's generally how we will look at conversion rates and how we will measure ourselves.
I see.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
we don't have anything like when I was at the care show and I met you a couple of weeks ago, a couple
Mm,
of people asked me if we work on commission, but we absolutely don't
yeah.
because that takes away the whole point of what we're doing.
Mm,
Because
mm,
then it would become a tick box exercise and it
mm,
would become, let's just get them in regardless of what it is they wanted.
mm,
So no, we
mm.
don't work on any sort of commission like that. Something I feel quite strongly about actually.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah,
I just think it's
yeah,
really important. It takes away the whole ethos of what we're about at Connect as
yeah,
well.
yeah. That's great. Okay, great. Well, this is for anyone listening. I hope you're been taking notes and start to implement some of what's Jack sharing today. Is there anything, Jack, that we've not covered up to now that you want to make sure that you convey?
No, not really. I think a lot of it sometimes I find it difficult because when you say, for example, you mystery shop the care
Mm,
provider, And the call does get answered, and the member of staff answers it in a very quick manner and doesn't really ask a lot
Right.
of questions. I feel really bad because actually what they're there for is to provide excellent care. So
Mm.
their skill set might not always be soft skills, inquiry management. It might not always be thinking with a commercial head on,
Yeah.
but why should they when their role is to care?
Yeah.
So I sometimes think that, we need to give either people the tools or give them the support to
Mm.
be able to manage the inquiries effectively, really.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
they're very, very busy. I go into care homes quite often, and they're so busy and they're so great with the residents. And
Mm.
that's what's really important at the end of the
Mm.
day, is the residents' well-being and happiness when they're in the care home of their choice.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, you might have people who are happen to be very good over the phone and have a particular skill that they just
Yeah,
as an individual have, but
yeah,
you can't rely on that as an organization. I would always agree with you to make sure you have some kinds of guidelines, training, support,
exactly. Yeah, it's given them.
and yeah, and I would actually always advise that to record all your inquiries within privacy policy, um
Yeah.
the guidelines and rules. But I don't know what you think, Jack, but having calls recorded and be able to listen back and make suggestions for improvements is part of that ongoing process of learning
Yeah,
and improvement.
yeah, definitely. As long as it's like you say, it's within your
Mm,
GDPR policy and that your
mm,
team are notified. I think that's a really good
mm,
way of doing it.
mm, mm, mm,
And it's not about sort of beating people over the head with it. It's
mm,
actually, this is where we can make improvements for the benefit of the person who's calling. And that really, it always has to go,
mm,
everything we spoke about today, Adam, it
mm,
always has to go back for the person
mm,
who's
mm,
looking for care and the potential
mm.
resident themselves, and recognizing and appreciating that journey that they've been on before they've made that phone call.
Great, Jack. Thank you so much.
Oh, my
Now, if
pleasure.
if anyone would like to get in touch, how can they best do that, Jack?
Yeah, so if anyone would like to get in touch just for an initial chat would be absolutely brilliant. So my email address is jac.owen@connect.studio, and that's Jack without a K. My phone number is 01204 232 041, or visit our website, which is just www.connect.studio.
Jack, thank you very much for
Oh, thank
being
you so much.
on the podcast. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye bye now.
Bye.